Colombia is a country where most people have only known conflict. Hundreds of thousands killed, millions displaced, and many kidnapped or disappeared. Over 60 years, the people have experienced violence at the hand of rightist paramilitaries, cartels, the government, and leftist guerrilla groups, most notably the FARC, or Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, and ELN, the National Liberation Army. While the government made peace with the FARC in 2016, and some progress towards peace has been made, Colombia's future is still uncertain. A major aspect of this conflict, especially during the renewed military campaign of the 2000s, has been roads. Now, roads aren't just something you do sick burnouts on at 2 a.m. They can be used for other things too. Infrastructure can be a means of control and access. Colombia's weak governance is cited as a deepener of instability. If a government can't enforce its laws, it leaves a vacuum that allows alternatives to be the ones exercising power. Building infrastructure such as highways has been a part of the Colombian government's strategy to assert itself. This attacks the problem from a couple of directions. Strategically, safe roads, at least in theory, address one of the root causes of rebellion: economic deprivation. Although imperfect would be a generous descriptor of the Colombian government's economic program in coca-dominated rural areas, it's been found that in Colombia, adding more and higher quality roads may decrease conflict substantially. The FARC themselves claim to have built 3,753 kilometers of road. Although the exact nature of who really built some of them is in question, just claiming ownership shows their theoretical importance to both sides as a means of state building. Ironically, FARC initially had an anti-roads policy because roads were seen as enabling government repression, but this swung around into a pro-roads policy in the mid-1990s because it contributed to their own state building and revenue. Operationally, secure roads also give the military a means to access underdeveloped areas where insurgents thrive, often inaccessible otherwise due to extreme terrain. Former Colombian Vice President Gustavo Bell once said in 2002, "Colombia has more geography than state." On the other side of the coin, securing roads, again in theory, denies the enemy's use of them. If a key part of the program is cutting off rebel profits gained through narco-trafficking and kidnapping on highways, control over them is vital. In the case of a country like Colombia, where half of the economy doesn't pay tax, imposing tolls can be a way to pay for this infrastructure, but toll stations on unsecured roads are vulnerable to attacks. Secure is then a load-bearing word. Securing lines of communication, even in supposedly friendly or rear areas, is a concern for any military. Doubly so for a military fighting a counterinsurgency where who exactly controls what territory is an open question, and the local population may be apathetic to the government or outright sympathetic to the insurgents. So as part of a renewed military effort under President Alvaro Uribe, the Colombian government implemented a national highway safety program, including an initiative known as Plan Meteoro. The Army's part in the plan called for raising so-called Plan Meteoro companies, or motorized road control companies. The first 7 were raised in early 2003 under each of Colombia's 7 divisions at the time. The divisions were responsible for maintaining these companies, and their G3 and G2 staffs were responsible for their planning and intelligence prep. In 2006, the 8th and 9th companies were activated, followed by the 10th in 2007 or 2008, 11th in 2009, and the 12th and 13th companies in 2012. The 10th company was simultaneously deactivated. Most of these companies' vehicles were provided on loan from the Colombian National Roads Institute, or NVIAS. Even by 2019, up to 73% of the force's vehicles were provided by this civilian ministry. After 4 years of experience patrolling Colombia's roads, the Army gleaned some lessons learned. Companies were noted to be vulnerable during movements, partially because units focused on mission objectives and not necessarily the movement. Ironically, this would put the mission at risk because they'd lose surprise and have their security and mobility degraded. So they published new doctrine in 2007, the Manual of the Motorized Road Control Company. Under this manual, companies were said to consist of a command, with a commanding officer, an NCO executive officer, and 2 soldiers, shown to be carried in a Chevy rebadged Isuzu D-Max, 2 motorized platoons, 42 personnel each, and an observation and reaction platoon, which was 48 military personnel and 1 civilian. This last one came in 2 types, a Type A and a Type B. Type B is really awesome and totally delivers on this video's thumbnail. But starting with the motorized platoons, these guys were focused primarily on the mounted duties of the company, including route reconnaissance, convoy escort, setting up checkpoints, neutralizing enemy checkpoints, and providing a base of fire for maneuvering units. They had a small HQ, recon section, a base of fire section, and an ASPC vehicle. Just to get out of the way, ASPC, or Apoyo y Servicio para el Combate, is Colombia's term for sustainment, which includes logistics functions, maintenance, and medical support. In this case, the ASPC vehicle could be a Ford 8000, the most truck-looking truck that's ever trucked, a Chevy Kodiak, or an Isuzu NPR box truck, which I imagine is the most truck-looking truck of Japan. Its exact function isn't fully explained, although it's always in the rear of the platoon and would be a primary medical evacuation vehicle. But with that out of the way, the recon section had 2 1.25-ton trucks, which could either be an old M715, a short-lived Vietnam-era truck, or an M1152 Humvee with a personnel carrying bed, and they needed it because they wanted to stuff 8 personnel in these things, serving 1 M60 machine gun, an MGL grenade launcher, a mortar, probably an M4 commando mortar procured from South Africa, although it isn't specified, and a dog handler. So unlike an American Humvee scout crew, which had limited dismount capacity for something like a checkpoint, there was quite a bit here. The base of fire section, meanwhile, was 2 M35A2 Rios. These were up-armored deuce and a halves, manned by 10 troops and serving 1 50 cal machine gun and 2 M60 medium machine guns. A real Vietnam gun truck. If you're over the age of 40, you're going wild right now. It's possible that armored personnel carriers with turrets like the ISB Meteor built on the Chevy Kodiak could have also filled this role, although it's unclear from doctrine alone if that was the intended niche. Moving on, the observation and reaction platoon had a supporting role. They'd lead formations to provide security and observation along the route, conduct dismounted fire and maneuver to dismantle illegal checkpoints, provide a base of fire when mounted, and conduct limited dismount surveillance missions. Both types had a 2-man HQ and an exploration section with 10 motorcycles in the 600 to 650cc range. The example in the manual from the period looks like a Yamaha XT600, but now they have Suzuki V-Storm 650s and other models too. Each motorcycle would carry 2 personnel for a total of 20. The Type A platoon had a larger support squad than Type B. It had a Toyota Hilux type pickup truck carrying 9 and serving an M60, MGL grenade launcher, and a dog handler, as well as an ASPC vehicle and 2 monitor cars. Funnily, the example given is a Chevy rebadged Opel Corsa.
Oi mate, it's called a Barina!
My wife would rather walk than get in one of these. The monitors were intended to be detached from the convoy, basically to scout out ahead incognito looking like a civilian car or taxi to detect enemy activity like an illegal checkpoint or ambush before the rest of the company. Lastly, the Type A platoon had a smaller checkpoint hunting squad. This was 10 soldiers and 1 civilian driver carried on an armored box truck like a Ford 8000, Isuzu NPR, or Chevy Kodiak. This was basically an infantry element that would be used to destroy illegal checkpoints by fire and maneuver. The defining feature of the Type B platoon was the checkpoint hunters were in a larger section with 23 soldiers and 1 civilian, and instead of a rigid truck, they were carried in a tractor trailer. Unfortunately, Mac from Cars was conscripted to fight the FARC. These are listed as having level 5 armor, implying resistance to armor-piercing 7.62 NATO. Everyone but the civilian driver, including the overall platoon commander from the HQ, would be carried in the trailer and split into 2 13-man squads, each with 2 asymmetric fire teams. The trailer would ideally have up to 4 cameras for monitoring the environment. This lended it to being a base for an observation post, particularly at night. There'd be 2 deployable stations for M60 machine gunners as well. The section would also have 2 light machine guns and an MGL grenade launcher. The civilian driver may have been to maintain surprise, because there was a lot of attention paid to counterintelligence for the tractor-trailer specifically. For example, they recommended not loading it or parking it at the military barracks. They also recommended applying decals representing fictitious transport companies on the trailer. In order to make dismounting less necessary, the container was meant to have a bathroom with a 500 use capacity and air conditioning. The checkpoint hunting section was considered particularly valuable, so if a task could be carried out by another element, that was preferred. When an illegal checkpoint was detected by the monitors and/or the scout motorcycles, the platoon commander would time it to raise the trailer's turrets on approach. Infantry would dismount from the container and maneuver under cover of the support section in the pickup. The ASPC truck would be maintained as rear security. I'm not sure how often this configuration was used, and given its covert nature, there isn't much photographic evidence I could find at least. I've certainly seen more photos of armored Kodiaks with firing ports, but I think it being official doctrine is cool enough. Today, you see a significant number of actual military vehicles in these companies. Up-armored M1151 Humvees, Sandcat MRAPs, the Hunter XL, and newer civilian trucks resourced through Invias, although oddities like the M35 gun trucks and M715s still exist. The force evolved organizationally too. It was found that being subordinate to divisions led to the companies being underutilized and overly aligned with the cavalry's conventional doctrine. So in 2019, the 12 companies were regrouped under 4 light cavalry groups, or grulies. The numbered companies became lettered meteor squadrons, designated A, B, and C. These are finally under a new light cavalry brigade. But the 4 groups are spread around the 4 corners of Colombia, with squadrons aligned to specific segments of highway in support of the conventional divisions and brigades. Sometimes the groups are even referenced as being part of another brigade in the news, probably actually just attached because they're operating in their area. You can see that they're clustered in the western Andes and Pacifico regions, given that's where most people live and most of the political violence occurs. As an example, Escuadrón Alcaravan, or A Squadron under the 6th Group, is in support of the 7th Brigade, patrolling the 104 kilometers of National Route 65 between Granada and Puerto Rico, no relation. Just part of the 5,300 kilometers of road the Grulies are responsible for. 20-month patron Asalambra asks, given you're focused on the YouTube channel, what do you think the role of the website is in the future? For those who don't know, I have a website called battleorder.org that actually predates the channel by a few months. I think I'll be mainly using it as an archive for hosting sources, like manuals and TONEs and such. It'll have any graphics or articles I make, but those are honestly more for fun activities, and I think making primary sources more accessible is important, especially ones that aren't easy to find by Googling in English or aren't online at all. The website doesn't make any money, so it's not really the main effort, so to speak. 30-month patron Jorge Del Rio asks, related to the Mexican armored brigades, how are units assigned, particularly in regards to the motorized cavalry regiments? So an addendum to my last video on Mexico's armored force, I was told by somebody that as of this year that the armored brigades no longer exist because the regiments are employed by the military zones anyway. So I haven't been able to independently find a good public source for that, although it seems like something that you just have to kind of know a guy to know. As for the motorized cavalry regiments, they're Humvee mounted formations. I may do a video on them, and there are like 28 of them, so I'm not going to dig into which zone each is a part of right now. But here's a map of the regimental garrisons. You can see that they're spread around. One example would be the 18th Motorized Cav Regiment, which is subordinate to the 38th Military Zone in Tenosique. Thanks for the questions, and if you want to have a question answered, join my Patreon at any paid tier to get access to my outro questions chat under the community. Until then, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.
Pink battle hammers and reinforced trusses, jetpacks and joyrides, no time for distresses, heads up tiaras and variable sweep wings. These are